Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Infinite Learning's webinar. My name is Rebecca Anand. I'm the co-founder and managing partner of Infinite Learning. So today's webinar is for anyone interested in the reformed national professional qualifications. It's going to be a great opportunity to listen and learn about the reforms in more detail and to ask any questions that you may have. We are delighted to be running this webinar today in partnership with UCL Centre for Educational Leadership, with whom Infinite Learning has a long and very successful relationship. Our expert speakers today are Annette Beard, Associate Professor and Programme Leader, and Dr. Andy Hodgkinson, also Programme Leader at UCL IOE. These guys are the masterminds behind the programme delivery and the model that's been redeveloped, and of course the content that goes within. As you'll no doubt be aware, the NPQEL has been reworked, and we now have 3 specialist programmes in its place. We'll look at those in a little bit of detail today. We still have the SL, the H and the EL, but again, the delivery model is very different, so we'll take you through that. We're really pleased to have Andy and Annette here to deliver this overview today, and we'll hand over to them in just a moment. But first of all, just a few small areas of housekeeping from me. At the moment, you're all on mute and your videos are off. So we'll allow our speakers to deliver their presentation. But please, as we go through, if you have any questions at all, pop them in the chat box or make a note of them. And we'll dedicate the remaining sort of 20 minutes of the session to Q&A, which is possibly going to be the most valuable section for you. There's also going to be a recording of this webinar, which will be sent to you tomorrow at 5 o'clock. And you will also receive a certificate of attendance at the same time. Immediately after the webinar, we will also send you an email with some useful links and a PDF copy of the PowerPoint. So no worries about taking notes. You can just take in the information and make a note of any questions that you may have. So I'll be back at the end to do some Q&A with Andy and Annette. But for now, I'm going to hand over to the experts. That's Andy and Annette. Over to you.
Right, it's really good to be here this afternoon in Dubai telling you about the new MPQ programmes. Those of you that have worked with us before will obviously recognise me and hear my voice, Annette Beard, because I've worked with you since the programme started and since Infinite Learning have been working with us. We're really pleased that Rebecca has chosen to work with us again, and we're going to explain to you why it is worth working with UCL Centre for Educational Leadership on the 3rd version of the MPQs. So one of the things that we like to celebrate is that we're #1 in the world for education for the 8th year in a row. This means we have experts working within the centre on leadership and on school curriculum and other areas of educational research. So we are really up to date in terms of the work that we do. But we don't rest on our laurels there. We also use this to make sure that we partner with a range of schools in England and around the world to actually do the programmes with. And we work with you in terms of case studies, exemplars, and some of you can work with us on the content if you wish to as well. And I'll explain a little bit later about the facilitation of the programme. So that means that you're working with a very well-recognised brand, us, UCL IOE, but also Infinite Learning, who are obviously leaders in UAE and further afield as well. So the important thing is,
Annette,
yeah?
can I just check? Can colleagues see the screen? Can I just check that fundamental piece? Can you see the screen, Annette? Just checking.
I can see the screen, yeah.
That's fair enough. Good, thank you.
That's okay. So the important thing is that we have worked together for a long time. Rebecca and I, as you know, do all the facilitator training in the UAE and further afield together, and we get excellent evaluations for that. So it's a recognised product and brand that you're working with. So the materials are written, as I've already said, by academics, but we also rely on schools to actually work with us as well. And our delivery model is fully blended and offers face-to-face days at all levels, either virtually or in school. And those of you that are continuing working with us will know that we very successfully put all the programmes online last year with the pandemic. So you're aware that we have a brilliant system, UCL Extend, where participants and yourselves can access materials, and then we expect you to use your own platform to actually deliver the materials yourselves. So it gives you a wealth of online materials with research and access to national and global discussion forums, because we do not just work in the UAE, we work in Europe and we work in the Far East as well. So we're very proud of that spread we have across the world. Next PowerPoint, please. So where does all this fit the National Professional Qualifications in the DFE's plan? So what you can see is there's the initial teacher training, there's the early career professional development that is obviously really important now in England, the early career framework as it's called, and we're actually a provider for that as well, so we're very proud of that. And obviously now we've got the National Professional Qualifications at 2 levels, the specialist level and the leadership level that obviously Rebecca explained, and it's all part of the teacher recruitment and retention strategy by the DFE in England. And obviously it reflects what you want as well in the Middle East and around the world, because obviously you are very motivated and interested by how you can recruit and retain your staff. And it is seen that the National Professional Qualifications are part of this golden thread going through from when you start your teaching, going through to when you obviously get to the top level, if you get to the top level. And Andy very conveniently has put on the next slide where you can see how this fits in this sort of framework. So you can see that we've got the specialist MPQs now instead of MPQML, which is leading teacher development, leading teacher teaching and leading behaviour and culture. They can follow on for some of your staff from the MPQML, so they can become more specialists, or some of your staff who've done MPQML, you may feel are ready to then move on to the leadership MPQ, the senior leadership. Then there's headship and the executive leadership programme. We will be offering with Rebecca in the UAE all of those programmes, although we're in negotiation about executive leadership because that hasn't tended to work in the past, and maybe it is better for it to be delivered centrally, perhaps in the UK, and participants come to us, but we're still discussing that. All of the programmes are still for aspiring and established leaders. So that's important to recognise that you can be aspiring to the role, so you're getting the skills ready to move into the role, or you can obviously be established. And I know some of you put people on the programme who are in both positions. So this is how the programmes are broken down, and you can see there are lots of domain areas within each of the different programmes. And you can see that in the senior part, the leadership, senior up to EL, there are 10 domain areas. And then in the specialist areas, it varies quite a bit, with leading teacher development having the least number. Now, what is very different to the previous MPQs is that we're having to work very closely with the DFE and the Education Endowment Fund to ensure that we actually keep to the fidelity of the programme. We have to submit to the DFE everything that we write and any changes that we make, so you can see that they've actually taken this up a notch or two in terms of making it a far more robust programme. The department want to be part of the development of the programmes by the different providers and actually approve it, and it will go to the Minister for final approval, who is Nick Gibbs at the moment. So you can see that this is very different to the 2 previous models. So you can see there are a range of domains within each of the programmes, and some of them are common across them, and some of them do follow on from the early career framework as well, which some of you may be interested in discussing at a different time. So this is then translated into learn that and learn how to. So you can see how robust the programmes are going to be, because we have to ensure that we are delivering to each of these bullet points. And it is really important that we show the DFE that we're doing this for them to actually sign us off and for the curriculum to be ready to be delivered in November 2021. I'm now going to hand over to Andy, who's going to explain the real nitty-gritty of the programme to you.
Thanks, Annette. I'll just put my camera on so colleagues can see me. I think you can see me now. So, as Annette has outlined, the programmes are designed around the teacher retention and recruitment strategy, which is quite an overarching strategy and policy from the Department for Education in the UK. It has a number of kind of underlying principles. One is about providing a route through the profession for colleagues that are working in class from their early days as a teacher into specialising and then into leadership. One of the things that we've worked with in the design of our programs, and I'll show you that in a minute, is around another element of the program kind of design and kind of framework that we've received from the department. And one of the things that the department are very much working on at the moment in England is around work-life balance. And so one of the things that you can see here is the route program time durations for the programs. So the specialists, as you can see, they last 12 months. And there is a period for which summative assessment takes place. That is actually the entire window, the 3-month period, I just want to clarify. And in that 3-month window, colleagues and participants, they have to undergo a case study that is central and prescribed again around a tight framework from the department. They actually only have 8 days to complete that summative assessment. So the 3-month period on the slide deck actually relates to everything that has to happen in relation to assessment at the end of the 12-month program. So that's why it talks about a 15-month duration, because basically what colleagues will do is they will engage in the program and activities for 12 months. There is then an 8-day period, which is set by the department, where colleagues undertake a response to a case study activity. And then for the remaining of that 3 months, providers like ourselves have to engage in marking, moderation, DFE sign off of our moderation, and then announcing the award at the end. So that is why you've got that 3-month period. And I just wanted to clarify that for colleagues. It's not that you've got 3 months to write your final submission, but there's a 3-month window in which all activity around the summative assessment elements have to take place. You can see there then what it means for the leadership programs, which are 18 months, again with the 3-month period for all of the summative assessment activity. And the only caveat, which is for colleagues in the UK, is that new head teachers and colleagues that are new to role are eligible for some additional support around additional new head teacher program, which we will be designing, but that will only be for colleagues in England that access that part of the program. Just to show you a bit more about what sits behind the program, one of the things that we've done at the very beginning is develop this logic model, which basically provides a conceptual framework of our thinking around what the new MPQs are for UCL. I'd like to point you first of all to the outputs, and these are the things that are probably the most important, because I always believe, a passionate believer, that as well as colleagues getting letters after their name for undertaking a piece of professional research or activity, there are other outputs as well. And so you can see here what we would expect to be seeing from colleagues engaged in the program. Other aspects, kind of elements for the pupil. So we would expect, to see pupils that colleagues are working with achieving higher attainment, and a particular focus as well at the moment in light of everything that's been happening globally for the last 18 months around their well-being. We would expect to see improved agency in terms of the impact for the leader and their career progression. The school mentor, and that is somebody I will come back to, but that will be somebody that is likely to be a line manager for the participants. And again, we would look to see that there is within the program structure 3 moments where we would expect the mentor to check in with the participants. And again, we would see in the output of those professional conversations an increased effectiveness and agency for the school mentor, and then on into what that then might mean for the school or the organisation that the colleague is working within, and also the communities that the schools are embedded within. And so they are the outputs. Then you can see various mechanisms through which those outputs will be achieved. and then you can see the inputs on the far left going backwards, and the inputs are really what I'm going to talk about now, because these will kind of they kind of unpick the framework and the delivery model that participants will engage with, whether they're on the specialist or the leadership program. So I'll show you those now. So in terms of the framework, you can I'll just give you a few seconds just to kind of capture what you can see on the screen. And this slide really outlines what participants will experience over either the 12-month or the 18-month period. And one of the things that you can see, first of all, I want to draw your attention to that within that 12-month period, the DfE have prescribed a certain amount of hours of learning, to which all kinds of engagement have to add up to. So for the specialist programs, we've got 55 hours, and for the leadership programs, we've got 75 hours over their 18 months, 55 over the 12 months. The components then are what you can see on the right-hand side of the screen. And these are the things that, the elements of the framework that participants will engage with. And this will be a blended approach. So some of these elements, colleagues and participants will access through self-directed learning online. And some of these elements, colleagues will access through facilitated spaces, either online or face-to-face components. But before I kind of unpick some of what those components actually mean, I want to bring your attention back to the kind of blue side of the screen. And this really translates the domains that Annette was talking about into how we've structured the 12 and the 18-month period. Because we've designed our programme framework around research from the Centre for Education and Leadership, from Kingu, who's our director, who has conducted some extensive research on school improvements and school cultures. And so we've taken the domains and structured them around research from the centre in terms of what leaders need to access in terms of things that have the most impact on the outputs that we just talked about in terms of pupil outcomes and participant outcomes. So you can see here that for the programs, whether they're leadership or specialists, they will engage in 3 modules. Obviously for the specialists, they will be over a period of 1 year. For the leadership, that will be over 18 months. And what we've done is we've mapped the domains against the research from the centre into where they would fit as a sequence in terms of access and engagement, whether it be through the online research or through the face-to-face events. For those of you that are familiar with the current iteration of the MPQs, you'll be aware that participants are expected, whether they're on the ML or SL, to conduct a school improvement project that they have to submit as their final assessment, and if they're on the H or EL, they have to do too. We have included an implementation project within our design, but I just want to reiterate that unlike the current iteration where that forms the basis of final assessment, the implementation project is simply a vehicle for delivering the domain content linked to the implementation within the framework. So I'm just going to skip back a few slides just to clarify that. If you look at all of the different programs, you can see that one of the domains that is in all of them is implementation. And so I just wanted to clarify that the domain content for implementation, which will have a whole load of learn that and learn how statements, is delivered through the implementation project. And we've done that specifically because we want that to be something that participants are engaged with in their own performance management cycles, or something they're engaged with as part of their day job. But it doesn't form the final assessment like the current iteration does. And so basically what colleagues will do is they will work on that project as part of their work-based learning. They will access school content, academic content from the online learning, and then they will engage in a cycle of acquiring new knowledge. They will then apply that new knowledge and then reflect on that new knowledge in terms of what's happening in the workplace through a number of program components. And that looks like this. Our learning audit and journal maps out at the very beginning of each domain area where a participant would kind of sit themselves. It's a self-assessment kind of activity against the statements within the framework. They will then use that information to shape their journey through the self-directed learning elements, which I'll show you the route in a minute, to access new information, whether it's through reading academic research or case studies, or engaging in online discussion with specialist learning communities. They will apply that through the implementation project as a vehicle, and then they will come to something that is probably the heart of the program for UCL, and it's probably our unique element within this is our peer learning groups. So our peer learning groups are small groups of around 6 participants that will come together over a number of times over the period of their program, and they will explore the new content that they've learned. They will consider how they're applying it in their settings, and they will engage in professional learning. And again, those peer learning groups are based on research that has come out of the Institute of Education at CEL, and it's based on some work from a colleague, Professor Louise Stoll, on professional learning communities. And they're semi-coaching peer learning groups where colleagues can unpick the reality of their new learning and how that is looking and what they're learning from it as they apply it into their day jobs. And the curricular model follows a spiral model in that respect, in that the notion would be all of this, underpinning all of this framework, is that colleagues access new content, they apply it and trial it in their settings, and they reflect on how that new learning is impacting on the intended outcomes. What that looks like for a participant's journey is something like this, and I'll come back to that other slide in a minute. So this would be for the specialist programs, and you can see here how we've broken this down into self-directed and facilitated activity over the 12-month period. And in term 1, we would be covering implementation, domains that are linked to implementation, school culture and professional development. It will start with the learning audit. Colleagues that will then attend a it is intended to be a face-to-face induction conference, but obviously with COVID at the moment and restrictions changing in different places globally, we are designing all of our material to either be delivered in face-to-face environments or can be facilitated virtually over the internet. That will provide people with an overview of the program, the kind of learning that they'll engage with, the kind of different activities that they will engage with, and they will encounter their first peer learning group. And then they go through a cycle each term of accessing facilitated online learning and peer learning group activity, supported by asynchronous online self-directed study, and then an activity linked to something called the learning journal. Now, the learning journal, as well as carrying the audit, will then have within it a number of formative assessment tasks. And the formative assessment tasks will be able to be chosen by the participants linked to what was coming through in their audit. And it will be a tracking mechanism to see how their needs are being met by the program, what their new learning is looking like, and how they are applying that within the implementation project. And it will be the space where they draw all their learning together against the framework content. At the end of each term, they will then have that mentor check-in with their line manager to kind of unpack what all of the program has been meaning for them in the process of the time that they've been working on that module. And then that cycle begins again for term 2, and then again for term 3. Finishing with a consolidation conference, again, either online or face-to-face, picking up on what the learning has looked like and the impact of the implementation project. So that will be the same for all of the specialist programs, although remember the content is slightly different for the 3 programs. You can just see the dates that have been put in for red. And I'll just these will all be in the slide deck that's shared with you afterwards. And then for the leadership programs, the MPQSL and the MPQSL differ slightly, obviously, because there are additional terms that colleagues will engage with, and also the difference between the SL program, whereas the face-to-face elements, the peer learning groups, are designed to be facilitated virtually, but can be delivered locally in a venue. For the leadership programs for MPQSL and for MPQH, there are some additional face-to-face events built into the schedule. And again, this was designed around the program specification that the Department for Education gave lead providers to build their programs around. So you can see that it follows a very similar model in terms of the delivery of the content. A number of the components are the same in terms of access. Obviously, what I should say, and just to clarify, for each of the domain areas and content, we have flexed the content and the kind of purpose of the material to suit the need of the participant. So if someone is engaging with a domain around curriculum, and maybe they're doing that in their leading teacher program, the content for that will be designed for someone who is aspiring to be the lead of a subject or a phase, perhaps. Obviously, when they access their online learning and content material, if they're on the MPQH, the content is designed for people that will be working at that level. So there's a flex within the material, even though the infrastructure and the architecture of the program is quite similar across the programs, the content will be different at each level. And you can see that how the differentiation here in terms of the 12 to 18 months with the additional face-to-face elements that you can see, and that's carried through into the MPQH. And again, just to point you as well, I think probably one of the logistical things you need to be noting is where the dates are in red. And then, as Annette has said, the MPQEL program, the main difference for the MPQEL program is that instead of the face-to-face events that colleagues will have for MPQH and SL, that they are replaced by a residential event at the beginning of the program and a residential event at the end of the program. And as Annette has indicated, we're still in the process of designing what this will look like for our international cohorts. It could be delivered virtually, it could be delivered locally at venues decided by the kind of partner, the delivery partner that we're working with, or it could be that we integrate the international cohort into a cohort that might be working out of London or another part of the UK. So, and the other element that I would just note within the EL is the additional support of some specific coaching. And actually that is also the case for H as well. So those two additional elements for H and EL is the coaching element and the more face-to-face components. I'm just going to go back and show you this slide now. You've seen the program routes, just to see how, just kind of unpick how the different components integrate so that colleagues have a kind of holistic view of what that learning looks like. So starting with the learning journal, that is where colleagues will capture their initial learning needs and then reflect on how they are working through the program through formative assessment tasks linked to the content areas and the framework. The peer learning groups, they are those small group peer coaching, peer mentoring groups facilitated by a trained facilitator to support colleagues in their learning and reflection on the domain content, how they are moving through the program, and also to provide solutions to possible barriers that colleagues are experiencing as they work through or work through the learning or implementing their implementation project. You can see there then the main content acquisition is through the self-directed learning, which is asynchronous, or the face-to-face events. And then underpinning all of it is how all of that is applied in the workplace through the implementation inquiry project. So I just felt it was important, once you'd seen the framework and the journey, that you colleagues had a bit of an insight into how the different components have been designed to integrate together to support each element in supporting the participant through their learning process. And I'm now going to come back to this slide. I'm going to hand back to Annette, who's just going to talk a little bit about how we're going to look to facilitate this, these components for you and with you. So I'm going to hand back to Annette. Over to you, Annette.
One of the guiding principles of the way that we have designed programmes in the past and obviously now in the future is that we like to have local facilitators. So all the facilitators that work with infinite learning are trained by both Rebecca and myself. And as I said earlier, we always get very high evaluations for those. So we're very proud of the facilitator training that we will do. Why do we use local facilitators? It's because you can contextualise the learning to the participants in front of you. You will understand the context within which they're working to and understand, for example, the implementation project and how it will fit within your schools. Obviously, we have to keep to the fidelity of the programme, so there will be quality assurance taking place, but it is important that your participants feel that what they're learning is applicable to their situation. So there will be facilitator training again. There will be new facilitator training for those new to the programmes, working on the programmes, but also there will be top-up sessions for those who've had the full facilitator training, some only this year, to actually ensure they understand the programme. Andy and I feel a particular part of the programme to have in the new facilitator training and the top-up is around the peer learning groups. It's going to be crucial to the success of the programme and to you as facilitators that you understand and can get your head inside those peer learning groups and understand what it will feel like for a participant. So that will be really integral to the new facilitator training. So as I've said, they're all delivered by your own facilitators, apart from the induction conference, which we will work with Rebecca, because certain elements of it we will deliver and perhaps get Professor Chingu to actually do an introductory talk about leadership and the importance of leadership. And we will do some elements to explain the implementation and the peer learning groups there, but you will have an important role to play in that induction conference as well. And certainly in the leadership programs, you will have a very important role to play in terms of those face-to-face days that Andy mentioned. So we felt it was important that the implementation project was kept, and I know Rebecca's very keen on this because, for example, in the Middle East, you all were very supportive of that two-term project and it going for assessment. So we're trying to keep that as a robust element within the programme so that participants are expected to do something as part of their day job to show that they've implemented something while they're on the programme. The change, of course, as well, is that we are expecting the participant line manager to be part of that. So when they do their targets for appraisal / performance management, whatever you call it within your school or group of schools, sits with them. One of their targets will be around the project and what they're going to do and the impact it's going to have. Then in line with the regular meetings that the line manager should have during the year, they will obviously follow the participant through and check on the project so that when they go to the consolidation conference at the end, they've got something robust to present at that conference. Why are we doing it this way? Because obviously we have to show participants have 90% attendance and engagement on the programme. That's the minimum required before they go to the case study summative assessment. So this is a really good way of doing it. So the school is accountable in terms of making sure the participant obviously gets involved in the implementation project and works their line manager, and the line manager is obviously accountable for ensuring the participant then works on it throughout the year of the programme. Then obviously that is accountable to us in terms of ensuring that they're going, that is an element of the 90% engagement. Rebecca established right at the start, and I backed it up in my first statement, we have worked together for quite a few years, and that means that Infinite Learning have an established team in your local area, and I think that is really important. Us as a provider of the MPQs have this delivery partner like a teaching school hub in England within the UAE that can actually offer you advice, support you, and back you up in terms of the programme. That is going to be a really successful part of working with us, that you've got someone there on the ground in the region to actually work with you and assist you. But obviously you've still got us back in England. I'll say England because we're all still working from home. So Andy and I are not in London, we don't live in London. So you'll have the team at UCL, and you'll have Rebecca and Paola and the rest of the team there to actually help you with the admin side of it and any questions. So we do hope that you will work with us and work with Infinite Learning on the new programmes. We feel we're designing a really exciting programme that moves on from the last two set of programmes and is at a higher level than before, we believe, and is still part of that golden thread that the DfE in England want to promote. And the final slide finishes off by showing that golden thread. So do put any questions in the chat box, and Andy, myself and Rebecca will try to answer any questions for you.
Thanks, Annette. I'm going to stop sharing the screen now, Rebecca, so we can take any questions.
Yes, please. Thank you, Annette and Andy. Obviously, we have been in discussions for months and months about these new programmes behind the scenes, but even for me, that was just really useful to kind of sit back and have that overview. I'm just going to say a couple of words and summarise a couple of the points there while people are maybe thinking about any questions they may have. I have to say it was an extremely thorough presentation, so no questions as yet. You obviously captured everyone's attention and perhaps answered all the questions that they may have had. I just wanted to pick up on a couple of things. I think some of the key points there was understanding really where this change has come from the DfE's perspective, and that it's about teacher retention and recruitment, but also that important work-life balance and trying to create a programme that's robust, as you say, but also addresses those issues around well-being and workload. I think the fact, however, that it's kind of underwritten so heavily by the DfE really, gives us still that strong credibility around these programmes. We know that they are extremely transferable, and with people moving around this region and internationally in the school sector, that the transferability of these qualifications and how well they are recognised globally really stands them in good stead. We know how revered they are in education across the world, and I think that's really important for everyone to recognise. I think very, very interesting as well, and perhaps again one of the unique selling points for the IOE is that so much of your work is based on current research. Having worked on these programmes in various different formats, we will look at different styles of leadership, for example, or what makes an effective team, and we'll look at Belbin and we'll look at Stephen Covey, and all these people will remain, but it's the current research and practice that's taking place in schools and bringing that learning into these programmes that makes them so current and relevant, and I think that's really important. I'd like to just say a few words around the implementation project. As Annette rightly said, I was kind of passionate and remain so about what they bring to the programme, and for me it was that with a project of this nature, and I'm so delighted that the IOE have maintained that, and also that it addresses one of those very important domain areas of implementation, but in such a clever and integrated way, because really that is where all stakeholders benefit. Because if we are carrying out an in-school project with the support of the mentor and your line manager that fits into perhaps the whole school development plan, that we've got student learning outcomes improving, every stakeholder in that process is then benefiting, and I think that's really crucial that you've kept that in there. And I know it's not an officially assessed area of the programme now, but I think what I can see happening is as schools more and more want to embrace a culture of research, action research, self-learning, self-improvement, that this becomes a core element of their culture. And I can even see schools publishing cohort research projects and celebrating that in school, and I think that's really very likely, and I know many schools do that already, so this will just feed nicely into that. I think one of the other key areas that Annette focused on was how we work with our own facilitators, and actually just over the last week or so I've been asking our current facilitators in schools to give us some feedback on their experiences on working with Infinite Learning and the Institute of Education. And in fact, if you go to our home webpage for the MPQs, you'll see some of these wonderful testimonials coming in. And I think, again, that's another area that was such a benefit and remains such a benefit in this model of delivery. That yes, the participants will gain so much from working with facilitators who are locally based, who contextualise the learning, and particularly in terms of those peer groups that Annette emphasised, that's going to be so important that whoever is facilitating those peer groups really understands the discussions that are going on and can facilitate that effectively. But the other big win was for those schools where their senior leaders become involved in the facilitation process, and just how much they have gained themselves, their own personal professional development, and being able to support colleagues in their school that are undergoing any of these programs. So it's such a comprehensive model, and it has, you know, been tried and tested over several years now in this partnership, and it has worked extremely successfully. So I just really wanted to emphasize that. Do we have, in the meantime, as I've been warbling on, do we have any questions? Let's have a little look. Hold on, I think there's one there. What was the main objective in reforming the NPQEL? Good one.
So the programs.
Sorry, Andy, I'll let you go.
Yeah, I'm just picking up on something you were saying there, Rebecca, around the kind of, it's almost a paradigm shift between the old programs and the new. And one of them is that the old programs have very much, and you've referred to some of them already, some theories that are around more generic leadership styles. And what they wanted to build into the new programs, and particularly the specialists, is the domain content that is very much expert orientated to classroom practice from within schools. So while some of those leadership things that references that you mentioned could be kind of cross organizational or even outside of the education domain, one of the intentions behind the new framework is to bring in a lot more evidence-informed research from within the education sector specifically. So the ML as well, then coming back, so that's one of them, and then the other one would be around particular notions of policy dimension around the, you could say, the increased awareness of the importance of well-being for leading behaviour and culture, an awareness or a growing awareness of the importance of professional development around impacting on schools, and then obviously a kind of, I'm remiss to say this, but the old ML would probably be sitting near the old NPQ, the new MPQ leading teaching, because that would be, you might say that the old ML program was for somebody that might be leading a phase or a subject. And so the leading teacher probably, if you look at the kind of intended audience, that might well still sit there, but with that caveat of the new content. But the other two programs are definitely designed around more the kind of widening perspective of colleagues that would be specifically leading professional development, and also more around culture and well-being and pastoral focus. So that would be my response. I don't know, Annette, if you've got anything else you want to add.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really good that there is a program called Leading Teacher Development, because all of those people listening obviously have had great professional development as they've moved through programs, or as they've moved through their careers, I should actually say. And obviously the facilitators have great professional development. It's a great way of actually developing people to actually understand the importance of teacher development. So I think it's a really good move that the DFE are actually investing time, energy and money into teacher development in this way, by having a program that is about great teacher development, basically, because all the research shows, doesn't it, from Vivian Robinson and other people we could reference, that actually teacher development is so important to what goes on in the classroom. So I think that one is a really positive move forward.
Brilliant, thank you. Excellent answers from both of you, very helpful indeed. I don't know if anyone's got any other questions. I'm gonna pose one that is often asked of me, kind of almost on a daily basis, still with programs that have been running. What happens if I change schools? Okay, so obviously we've got scenarios where somebody might start in the November, and even then that will take them with a 12-month program and the fourth term. I mean, I've kind of got my idea of what the answer might be here, but I would like to pose it to the experts in the room.
If they change schools, it would be the same as previously, that hopefully if they're still within the UAE, they can continue with you, Rebecca. And this morning I was answering an email, somebody who was in UAE and is now down in Bristol, and I was supporting her with how she can finish the programme now she's back in England. So it is still possible if they go to elsewhere. As I said, we've got places around the world in the Far East. We work with groups of school in Hong Kong, in China, in Brunei and Jeju Island, for example. So if they move to any of the international schools that are working with us, then that is okay. But because the programme, some of it is online, there's more flexibility now than there was in the past in terms of getting the programme completed. But I don't see it as a problem. And of course, schools can use it as part of their retention strategy if it overgoes a summer holiday to actually retain the staff. But obviously people don't necessarily want to do that, but it shouldn't be an issue like it wasn't an issue in the past, really.
Yeah,
I think I just want to add to that as well, that actually part of the specification from the department has been around accessibility. So for colleagues that might work part-time or need to take time out of the profession for, you know, a whole raft of different reasons, or portability. So they've been, but that whole issue has been built into the design specification. So those component elements that Annette's just talked about had that kind of the answer to that question in the back of our mind about making them portable.
Yeah, I think, you know, obviously when I remember in the early days speaking with Jonathan as well, and you know, really the goal was to design something that was kind of bulletproof for the future, because we anticipate these kind of things this may not be the first and last time we experience something like this. And if I can just say from Infinite Learning's perspective, as Andy said, we've got face-to-face sessions built in there. We anticipate, you know, initially they will be virtual face-to-face, as we have done this year with facilitation training. And I think Annette and I, when we embarked upon some of our training, we were, as perhaps some of you as teachers were initially, a little bit skeptical, how is this actually going to work? I personally don't believe it ever replaces face-to-face, but there are lots of benefits, and I think we've all become much more sophisticated in the use of online platforms, both as facilitators but also as participants, and we're much more comfortable with that. And we've worked with some really nice hybrid models, whereby we had a group, Annette and I, of teachers, quite ironically, who themselves were all together in the same room in China. Annette was in the UK and I was in Dubai. So they had two virtual trainers, but they themselves had that networking face-to-face experience. So I think there are multiple ways we can do this. What we do know is that with the online capabilities, if someone has even left this region, they can join the face-to-face session virtually and can complete the program in that way, with the remaining elements largely, some of them being self-study and online. Okay, do we have any more questions? Okay, I mean, obviously, I'm always here at the end of an email or a phone. If you have anything at all that you think about afterwards and you want to ask, please do get in touch. You'll get an email soon after this webinar anyway, as I say, with the PowerPoint. If you've got any questions at all from myself or Andy or Annette, please don't hesitate to get in touch. The registration windows are now open with Infinite Learning, and we're hoping that the application windows with the IOE will be open sometime in July, although that's DFE dependent, so we will keep you posted on that. Just one final piece of very exciting news from our side is that we have had it confirmed today that the KHGA will now approve and attest the NPQs with Infinite Learning and the IOE. So for those of you who work particularly in Dubai who want to be able to add this officially to part of your teacher qualifications, you can now do so. So we are delighted to share that with you. That's been a long time coming. Been a lot of paperwork involved and lots of smiles and thank yous, but we are finally there. So we're absolutely delighted to share that news with you, and that will be on the website officially in the next couple of days.
Yeah, and I'd like to add our congratulations to you, Rebecca, because I know it's taken a long while to get there, and it's really good in terms of kudos in terms of working with us and moving forward, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely, yes. These things, as they should be with the KHGA, they're extremely robust. There has to be an international certificate organisation with the awarding bodies, and yeah, it's a very rigorous process, both in terms of infinite learning and for the IOE. So we feel a big sense of achievement, and we're very delighted. Yeah, thank you. Okay, well, I will, if there are no other questions at the moment, let you all go. Wish you a lovely evening, and in case I don't see you before, a wonderful summer holiday when you all get there. I know we're all counting down the days a little bit over here as things heat up, and safe travels if you're managing to travel back home. Good luck with that. Again, it's a little bit up in the air, but I hope you have a relaxing break regardless, and thanks again to Andy and Annette. Good night.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all of those who have attended, and we hope that you will want to work with us all in the future.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone. Take care.